And we're live. Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Azure webinars. My name is Herns Hermida. I am the Azure Business Lead for Microsoft Philippines, and today's topic is about ensuring data privacy and security on Azure. So there's lots of slides to be covered and lots of things to be covered in this particular webinar episode today. This is really all about giving you a overview of all of the different security services on Azure today, just to make sure that you protect your data and your applications that run on Azure. So just a few housekeeping rules before we start. This entire webinar is actually recorded, and you will get a email with a URL of the recording of this webinar within 24 to 48 hours, so that you can listen to this webinar at the time and the date of your convenience. You can stop, you can start, you can pause, you can rewind the recording of this webinar, and you can also see some notes from this webinar, especially if any of you ask a question. Speaking of which, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to pop those questions right into the Q&A box inside of your webinar interface, and I will try to answer those questions while this webinar is going on. All right, so let's go. Now, it is important to probably start grounding this entire security discussion on the findings that we have had as Microsoft. So Microsoft, as in a regular basis, releases what is called the Microsoft Security Intelligence Report. The 24th edition of this report covers January to December 2018. So if I'm not mistaken, the latest Security Intelligence Report that covers January to 2019 has already been released. But anyway, this report, it analyzes data that comes from diverse sources, including 6.5 trillion threat signals that go through Microsoft daily. It includes findings and also insights about what we've learned from the field and what the recommended best practices are as far as security is concerned. And it also covers all of these Asia Pacific insights of all of these countries, including that of the Philippines. Now, one of the report is pretty comprehensive, so I encourage you to download the Security Intelligence Report. It's very easy to remember. Just go to microsoft.com/SIR to download the report. But one of the things that I've decided to share for you today is some of the security best practices for organization. The first security best practice is prevention. We have to put in preventive controls to decrease the cost of attacks for cyber criminals who use who to and you can use things such as cloud backup, access control, and also educating your employees for safe cyber practices, and maintain robust IT policies that err towards assumption that a cybersecurity attack might happen in the future. Is just a question of when. The second point is about detection responses, ensuring that you leverage cloud technology to limit attackers' access to data and help security operations better respond to attack. So in essence, it's using cloud technology and the practically unlimited scalability of the cloud to help you in the fight against data leakage and cyber attacks, and then putting in methods for protection as well as detection and response. Now, we also have to remember that the cybersecurity landscape is already rapidly changing. Cyberspace is the new battlefield. Even, for example, hackers are using cloud technology right now to perpetrate phishing attacks, DDoS attacks, and different types of cybersecurity threats that's happening in the world today. Security skills are also in very short supply. So the problem becomes bigger, but we are running short of people who can actually tackle this problem, both in a technical and a managerial standpoint. And now virtually anything can be attacked. It's not just servers, not just applications, not just databases, but also IoT devices or even robotic components that are software driven. The other observations and challenges that I'd like to share from the report is that threats are increasing in volume and sophistication. So it's no longer just the amount or the size of the attack, but it is also the amount of sophistication, of how the attack is actually perpetrated. Even attack automation and evasion techniques now involve multiple dimensions. It's now also becoming apparent that the hackers and the bad guys out there are actually using cloud technology to perpetrate their attacks as well. We also have to accept that we cannot stop all attacks. It is other than disconnecting yourself completely from the internet or all other external networks, prevention must be there because we have to assume that we cannot stop all attacks. And for those attacks that actually come in, despite all of the protections that we put in, we have to know how to recover quickly from that. Threat detection also requires context from diverse signal sources, not just from single or several types of diverse sources. So a certain amount of machine learning or automation needs to be put in, or you need to use this so that you can correlate signals from one aspect of your entire system with another aspect of an entire system. For example, if a complex attack or multifaceted attack happens within your network, whether it's on the cloud or whether it's in your private network, if, for example, how do you correlate, for example, what you're seeing in your firewall logs together with your application logs? Perhaps they're actually pointing to the same thing, except that this particular attack is actually attacking or pointing to different aspects of your application. It also requires a human blend of human expertise and technologies. You cannot just simply rely on the automations and the firewalls and all of the appliances to protect ourselves, but we also need the real-time expertise of humans working together with the machine side by side. Now, we also need to think about designing for failure. Whereas before, we've designed our systems not to fail, and then we try to prevent every possible attack. Like I said in the previous slide, we have to assume that we're going to be attacked, and that attack is not going to be stopped all the time. There will be some that will actually come in. So now the thinking must be revolving around resilience. How do we design our systems to recover quickly? And we have to assume that we are already compromised. So put on that paranoia hat and think about how you can protect, detect, and respond along the kill chain. So it's like thinking about an attack that's already happening. It's just a question of how fast can you detect it, and if you do detect it, where in your system does that particular attack is happening right now? What effect is it going to give, and how do you stop that in the middle? Traffic to the cloud is starting to become a tipping point. As more and more organizations such as yours bring application to the cloud, you have to extend your network protection not just to cover your physical network in your own controlled network, but also that of a telco's network and also of the subset of the cloud service providers network. Software as a service app usage is also increasing, so you'd have to take into account that. And also the usage of modern application architectures is growing as well. So a great example of that is that applications are moving more and more towards container-based architecture rather than just a VM storage type of infrastructure. So you'd have to make sure that your protection coverage includes those different types of modern application architectures as well. Now, some of the cloud security challenges that we face today includes visibility into security and compliance. So, without security controls in place, a lot of these breaches will take months or even longer to discover. For example, in Asia Pacific, we found that through our cybersecurity center, the average time that an attack is actually detected, especially those that have been inserted for a long time, takes between 180 and 200 days. The other bit is insecure configurations. How do you know in your vast IT infrastructure which parts of your IT, whether it's your database, your network, your firewall, your hardware, software, just literally thousands upon thousands of failure points that can be misconfigured, that can be the cause of a security breach. So the question now is how do you detect and respond to that whenever an attack when attack happens to a particular weak point in your infrastructure. And the third thing is what I said a while ago is the increasing in the number of sophistication of attacks. Your network security approach should also require a foundational change. We have to embrace what is called the zero trust model. So it's kind of self-explanatory. We assume that there's always something wrong that's going to happen, and we cannot rest on our laurels and assume that nothing is going to happen. We always have to assume that something is always going to happen. We have to assume the stance that cloud native networking as a service is going to become a reality, or is a reality right now. You're no longer in control of your entire network as you were in 15, 20 years ago when cloud did not exist. Now, because more and more applications are going into the cloud, you have to make sure that your network as well as your application components are secured both in the cloud and outside of the cloud in your hybrid environment. And you also have to make sure that we enable a DevOps model. So if you're familiar with the concept of DevOps, it's continuous monitoring adjustments of your entire network and security infrastructure to guard against persistent or new threats that are going to come out in the near future. So this is the reason why when you put your applications and infrastructure into Azure, there are a different set of security components within Azure that you can use. So this comes in the form of, for example, Azure Active Directory and Azure Active Directory domain services. So you can synchronize your on-premise directories and enable single sign-on across all of your applications that run on Azure on-premise or even other clouds through Azure Active Directory. So Azure Active Directory becomes your single focal point, if you will, of of access control and also privileges. We already has also expanded Azure Active Directory to do domain services on the cloud as well to authenticate users using Azure Active Directory accounts. Azure Information Protection is also a set of services within Azure Security that protects all your sensitive information, whether it is Microsoft Office documents that is inside running on Office 365 or outside of Office 365 or even on-premise Office installations. Majority of the time that we're going to be spending today is going to be spent over discussing the different components such as Security Center, DDoS protection. So the rest of the time we'll give you an overview of all of these other security services. The Microsoft security is hinged upon three basic foundations. First is secure operations, the partnerships that we have within the security players within the industry, as well as enterprise class technology. We operate over 100 data centers across 58 global data center regions across 6 continents. Each physical data center is protected with world-class multi-layered protection, and it has passed over 200 plus security compliance standards from all over the world. The entire data center infrastructure across all of these 100 data centers is secured using operational security with restricted access, 24/7 monitoring, manned by global security network. Our global cloud infrastructure includes both custom hardware and also network protection from outside of the edge to inside to within the network itself. We have a 24 by 7, 365 days a year security operations that work for you behind the scenes. This is manned by 3,500 dedicated cybersecurity professionals that roughly have three different assignments. One is the Cyber Defense Operations Center, whose job 24 by 7 is to really watch over the Microsoft cloud infrastructure to protect our customers from external threats, also advising our customers to protect themselves against external and internal threats. We also have the digital crime units, or the DCU, whose job is to actually go out there and find the bad guys and take down botnets and also other fun stuff. And we also have the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center, which takes all the information across the security landscape and builds intelligence so that we can be resilient and protect our customers and our partners who run and use our cloud against future threats. Now, the other secret sauce that we have is the Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph. Now, think about it. The footprint of Microsoft is simply massive all over the world. We have thousands of users using Microsoft Azure, or thousands of companies who are authenticating over 1 billion Azure user accounts. We have 400 billion emails that are analyzed on a monthly basis through thousands of users that are using Outlook and Office 365. Every customer that uses Windows and Office continuously connects to our update Windows updated Office Update Center. And so the whole point of this is that we understand and receive unique signals from every PC, every PC, every user, every user of our cloud service, and we know how users are actually using our service. It's not to snoop on you, but to understand what we deem as normal behavior, to put it simply, and what we deem as abnormal behavior. So take, for example, we can see the attack signatures of a particular hack or a particular security breach from one customer in, say, Azure, and then protect our other thousands of customers in Azure from the learnings that we have gathered from from that customer that has been recently attacked. So this is the product of getting trillions of signal across the intelligence security. Stopping cyber attacks, like I said a while ago, requires the combination of both humans and the machine. The other thing that allows us to become effective against fighting cyber attacks, putting all these capabilities within the Azure product, within our Office product, within our Windows products, and all our other products, is the use of intelligence. Is the use of machine learning intelligence driven by artificial intelligence. So we build local ML models, metadata-based ML models, sample analysis-based ML models, and use big data analytics across our intelligent cloud and intelligent edge from 6.5 trillion signals. Take all of that data, crunch it, and use machine learning to understand what is really happening from a security standpoint, so that our human experts and the machine can work side by side to face all of this. Now you can see here at the bottom of the slide what some of the examples of the widespread security threats that we have seen in the internet, and how our cyber attack protection mechanisms that combine human and machine elements protect you against them. Other than that, the second pillar is our enterprise class technology across protecting our users across identity and access management, threat protection to help stop damaging attacks with integrated and automated security, information protection, and security management. When it comes to identity and access management, the way it is the centerpiece of this is actually Azure Active Directory. Azure Active Directory can provide secure authentication, whether it's multi-factor authentication using your mobile phone, or using any biometric scanning or biometric authentication mechanisms through hundreds of our partners. It also provides conditional access and also identity protection as well. Across Microsoft Threat Protection, we protect identities, your endpoint devices, whether they are PCs or mobile devices, user data, wherever they may be, or whatever form or shape they may be. It may be Microsoft Office or non-Microsoft Office. Your apps that's running on Office 365, Dynamics 365, Power Platform, even Azure, and of course your entire infrastructure. Information protection is a class or a category of technologies that we have within Microsoft that can locate and classify information anywhere it lives. So you can, for example, across Microsoft 365 or Office 365, discover and classify sensitive information. Say, for example, you want to scan across all of your OneDrive or SharePoint or even PC-based files on all documents or Excel spreadsheets that have certain keywords, and then apply protection policies based on based on the documents that you have discovered. You can also monitor and remediate. So, for example, if somebody is trying to access an Excel spreadsheet from outside of your network that is not authenticated through Active Directory, you can actually proactively be alerted, and then you can take away access or become more strict in terms of accessing that document to avoid data leaks, and also accelerate compliance by using AI and machine learning based tools to identify whether you have any compliance breaches, or if you're, for example, wanting to be ensured that you are compliant with GDPR, there are tools that can evaluate your infrastructure, whether it's on infrastructure and your data and your documents, whether you are compliant with GDPR or not. Security management also allows you to strengthen your security posture with insights and guidance. So it involves giving you visibility, control, and guidance. So you will see some of those examples across the Azure security solution space, and I will describe later on how you can get visibility across multiple facets of your IT infrastructure and control security management, whether it's identity, devices, apps, data, and infrastructure. Now, the third pillar is our partnerships with our many, many partners all over the world. So we partner with our peers. Some of them are competitors, yes, but the cybersecurity problem is actually bigger than our petty competition, if you will. We work with industry alliances, and we also work with a number of governments to ensure that cybersecurity laws become mature as technology goes along. And in essence, cybersecurity laws become relevant to the times. Now, a lot of people think about doing cloud, and one of the first things that these people think about is that there are risks and benefits. If you ask people about what is stopping them from using the cloud, the first thing that they always said is it's security. So they don't have control over the design and operation, it's security of the infrastructure, network, identity access, data. The second part is privacy. I'm not so sure whether my data is going to be private when it runs on Microsoft Cloud. The third part is compliance. Are you compliant with our industries or the industry accepted compliance standards and security standards? And do you provide transparency? So we found that a majority of our customers understandably have concerns around data security as a barrier to adoption to the cloud. And a significant portion has found that the using of the cloud will result in their minds a lack of control. But we also realized, and our customers have realized, a majority of them has said that the moment that they move to the cloud, 94% of them experience security benefits that they didn't previously have on premise, because simply there were more security capabilities that's been made available to them via the cloud in a much grander scale, in a more cost-effective manner, rather than doing it themselves. A majority also said that privacy protection has actually increased as a result of moving to the cloud. Moving to the cloud actually makes you more secure. What does that what does that mean? So it may sound like a misnomer, but trust me when I explain it this way. You shift some of the commodity responsibilities to your provider. So for example, taking care of encryption keys, making sure that user authentication happens, making sure that user authentication happens all the time, simple or relatively advanced threats against identities are taken care of. That's all taken care of by the cloud service provider. And then you leverage cloud-based security capabilities to even increase your effectiveness. And then you use cloud-level intelligence to improve your detection and response time. All of these three capabilities are not available to you if you do the traditional on-premise approach, because security is a very challenging and under-resourced function. Think of your own organizations. How many people do you actually have within your organization that focuses on cybersecurity? Microsoft has 3,500 of them. Now, we also have to remember that cloud services security is a shared responsibility. So this diagram, I think, is a great capture of what the scope of responsibility of you as an organization, whether across on-prem, IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS. So, for example, when you use Office 365, which is a SaaS service, security of everything from the application all the way to the networking that makes this Office 365 works, in this case, is the responsibility of Microsoft. But in your case, you're also responsible for administration. So, for example, if you have weak password policies, that's no longer Microsoft's fault in a sense, because you have weak password policies. So you have to make sure that you use or utilize the tools that we make available to you to make sure that you cover all aspects of security. So this is an important slide for everyone to remember. So it doesn't mean that, for example, that you move your virtual machines to Azure, which is IaaS, that we are responsible for the security of your data within IaaS. No, you are responsible for that. However, we do provide a lot of tools within Azure, and also a lot of tools from our trusted third-party ISVs to help you protect data within IaaS in this example. And we'll talk about more of that later on. One of the first tools that we always recommend to customers the moment you turn on workloads on Azure. So for example, when you move your virtual machines to Azure, when you start moving your applications, creating your own developed applications running on Azure, putting your databases, and start configuring your Azure subscription to connect to your on-premise data center in a hybrid fashion, one of the first tools that you should turn on is something called Azure Security Center. Azure Security Center is based on technology that combines aspects of identity and access management, network management, data security management, threat protection, intelligent edge, and security management with some recommended built-in controls that you can use. But the whole thing about Azure Security is that it gives you visibility of your security stature within Azure. So let me talk more about that right now. Azure Security Center does two things. First is that it strengthens your security posture. You have to have a baseline first. Whenever you run applications, databases, VMs, networks, or anything on Azure, what is the security score in a sense of all of these components as compared to industry standards or the standards that you hold as a security professional? The second thing is that it also helps you protect against threats. Let's take a look at how it works. So Azure Security Center works in this way. Whether you have components on Azure by IaaS, PaaS, or networking data or what have you, and even on-premise running on VMware, Hyper-V, or even any cloud for that matter. So let's say you're running a very heterogeneous environments where your applications is all over the place. It's on AWS, it's on Hyper-V, it's on VMware on-prem, it's on IaaS, PaaS, on Azure, and even on third-party clouds. What Security Center does is that it takes a look at all of these components via agents or via reading of the logs, and then gives you an overview dashboard of your security posture across all of these platforms using machine learning. Again, remember when I told you a while back that we learn from we learn from how our thousands of our other customers, how they're attacked, how we protect them against cybersecurity threats. All of that you get as a benefit because machine learning is basically giving you recommendations on how to increase your security. So the result is your security posture management. You have secure score, policies, and compliance, and improve automation. What this means is that it will literally give you a score of how you are doing from a security standpoint, as far as, for example, access control, compute, are your SQL servers secure, is your network secure, are your application servers secure. So you basically get insights into the security states of your cloud workload. So you can actually improve your secure score and overall security posture in minutes. How? You simply click in the Azure Security Center a set of recommendations. It will give you a set of recommendations on how to, for example, increase your SQL Server security score by 1 point. It may involve things, for example, such as strengthening your passwords, creating VPNs, and so on and so forth between your SQL Server and your applications. If you follow all of those steps, your secure score will increase. So it's a matter of think about this as doing a self-audit for your security infrastructure or for your Azure infrastructure, and then following recommendations as given to you by Azure Security Center. Then you do those recommendations, apply them, then your secure score will increase. You can also manage security policies and access compliance in minutes. So for example, how do you handle new machines without antivirus? What do you do if you have PCI non-compliance? What do you do if would you allow, for example, the provisioning of a SQL server that has their database unencrypted? Would you allow a subnet to be included that is not secure? And so on and so forth. So you can define all of these policies and also enforce them on Security Center. Now, you can also improve automation. So you can do quick fixes to recommendations, or you can also automate responses through, for example, through third parties such as ServiceNow or Microsoft Teams. So here's a concrete example. So say, for example, Azure Security Center found that your SQL Server has a low security score, and when you clicked on recommendations, let's say it made recommendations that you should encrypt tables A, B, and C, but you're not the DBA. So when you click another button, it can, for example, send a ticket to the DBA, to your DBA via ServiceNow, via Microsoft Teams, or send an email through Outlook. You can also extend, customize, and share your organizational policy. You can create your own organizational policy, or you can base it from built-in standards. So for example, if you want your Azure infrastructure to be compliant with GDPR, there are already set of policy standards that have been defined for you, and all you need to do is just apply them in your Azure components as recommendations. You can write your own recommendations, and you can even share this across your Azure Security Center community. There's an online community of security professionals, like-minded professionals such as you, who share their own policies across different users. So you don't actually have to write it from scratch. You can follow their recommendations or the Microsoft recommendations. The Azure Security Center ecosystem also continues to grow, because not only we don't do this ourselves, but we also provide scores that are, for example, defined by our partners in the industry. We provide security posture management with a single pane of glass. We receive third-party recommendations. So for example, if you run Security Center and do a secure score audit for, let's say, for example, Oracle, we've actually worked with Oracle, even though Oracle is a competition, to provide us what is a high scoring Oracle database. What are the attributes of a high security score Oracle database? And the recommendations are there in Azure Security Center as well. So we worked with um, people like, for example, Checkpoint, Tenable, CyberArk, and there are more coming in that particular organization to help you. We also Security Center also strengthens your cross-cloud security posture. So it's industry leading in the sense, because not only does Security Center give you a compliance or security score on components running on Azure, but it can also do this across multiple modes of computing, whether it's container, SQL Server, IoT, networking, or even access and compute, whether it's Azure or third-party clouds. The second thing that Azure Security Center is that it helps you protect against threats, whether it's cloud native workloads, servers, databases, or IoT. It can provide and give you recommendations on how to protect Linux and Windows servers from threats. So for example, it doesn't actually matter whether your Linux or Windows server workloads runs on Azure or even on AWS or in GCP. It uses things such as Defender ATP. It uses behavioral analytics that takes a look at things such as lateral movement, user authentication, and gives you recommendations and alerts in Security Center if, for example, there's malware that's coming in, or if there are lateral movements that are already going on that you're not aware about. So it will give you an alarm when this happens across your different VM infrastructure, across your different clouds, or even on-prem. You can actually turn on virtual vulnerability assessment for VMs as well. We partnered with Qualys, who has a fantastic product that takes a look at takes a look at all of your virtual machines deeply across an operating system, all the way down to the system layer, to see whether you have VMs that are running on Azure or even on GCP, on AWS, that are vulnerable. And you can trigger this on Azure Security Center. It also provides workload protection for containers. So here's a screen cap of what it shows you. So not only does it gives you recommendation on how to secure your virtual machines, but it also provides recommendations on how to secure your containers, whether they run on Azure Container Registry, Azure Kubernetes Services, or even open source Kubernetes. It also provides your data services from threats, so it can detect attacks for your SQL database, MySQL, Postgre, and storage accounts. You can mitigate threats using Azure SQL databases and configuration security best practices. And you can even do discovery, classifications, labeling, and protection of sensitive data in Azure Security Services, Azure SQL databases. That is all running on Azure Security Center as well. Now, this is actually pretty nifty, because if you use MySQL or Postgre by yourself on premise, you would have to use a third party or configure that third party to detect possible threats in real time, for your MySQL and Postgre. But you can, but with Azure Security Center, you can now do this across MySQL and Postgre on Azure or even on other clouds. Now, we also are are adding more capabilities such as protecting SQL servers on Azure virtual machines. Other things include malware reputation screening for Azure storage and also Azure threat protection for Azure Key Vault. You can also use Azure Security Center to protect your IoT infrastructure, whether you are using IoT Hub or IoT Central, and all of your IoT components that are currently running on Azure, including gateway applications that receive raw data from your IoT devices, that can be scanned and managed from Azure Security Center as well. You can also protect your workloads from threats. So you can use the industry's most extensive threat intelligence to gain deep insights. So whether it's applications, VMs, containers, SQL, IoT network, or management. The third aspect of Azure Security Center is that it also gets you secure. It gets you to secure faster. And the reason for that is that everything in Azure Security Center is almost automatic. It automatically discovers and onboards Azure resource. It gives you unified view of your security across your hybrid cloud workloads. So think of it as a single pane of glass that gives you your security standpoint across all of your different components, whether it's on Azure, on-premise, or on other clouds. Azure Security Center also works together with Azure Sentinel, which I will talk about later on, to give you threat protection at cloud scale. While Azure Security Center protects your cloud workloads largely, Azure Sentinel is your cloud native SIEM that protects your other components as well. And then acts as your single SIEM across all of your different workloads. So we're going to get to Azure Sentinel in a minute. So that's Azure Security Center. Okay, so now we go to Azure Sentinel. This is something new from our roster of Azure Security Services. Now, the thing that Azure Sentinel wants to address and help our customers on is the fact that your digital estate continues to expand. So not only do you have your own assets, but you also have assets across different places across the digital landscape. Now the SOC challenges. So it typically, okay. So let me step back a bit. So when you run IT infrastructure, you would have something like a SOC, a security operation center. These are the challenges of a traditional SOC. You have lack of automation. You have people looking at monitors and alerts, but are not really skilled enough to understand those alerts. And speaking of alerts, there are noisy alerts. There are lots of false alarms. There are too many products that typically are comprising the security operations center that gives away too many signals. And there's also rising infrastructure cost and upfront investment. What you initially thought that you're going to need just one infrastructure component for your SOC actually increases over time. The security operations team that mans your stock is going to be armed and be working side by side with cloud and artificial intelligence as provided for and as powered by Azure across Azure Sentinel. This is really what Azure Sentinel brings to value as far as your security operations center is concerned. So Azure Sentinel is a cloud native SIEM for intelligent security analytics for your entire enterprise. It collects security data across your enterprise. It detects the threats with threat analysis and combination of AI. It investigates your incidents guided by AI, and it also allows you to rapidly and automate protection across your entire estate. Now, right now, if you're using Office 365, your Office 365 can actually be collected by Azure Sentinel and be monitored and detect security threats for free. But you can also integrate this with your existing SIEM tools. Now, how it works is that the collection part starts with SIEM integrating with your different Microsoft services such as applications, users, infrastructures, public clouds, and even third-party security solutions. So this is the difference between Azure Security Center and Azure Sentinel, in that Azure Sentinel, out of the box, so to speak, becomes your SIEM and consolidates all security findings from existing security solutions that you may already have in place. That data is then gathered in the Azure Cloud in storage, where it is displayed to you via a dashboard. But before it's actually displayed to you via a dashboard, Machine learning, predefined queries, and even automation playbooks come into play, so to display to you not just extrinsic data but also insightful data. So on the back end, it includes data ingestion, repository, and data search capabilities. And you'd have to, whatever insights and threats or alerts that you get from SIEM, you also need to take action on that. So this is the reason why it also has integration to ServiceNow and different other tools, and also connects to communities such as GitHub so that you can source solutions from there as well. It focuses on security and unburdens your security operations from IT tasks. So simply put, the Azure Sentinel is the one that takes care of work side by side with Security Center. Um, so while Azure Security Center takes a look and automates and alerts you of threats from your Azure workloads and your other cloud workloads, SIEM, Azure Sentinel also combines together with Azure Security Center to combine insights from security data from your other parts of your IT infrastructure as well. It may be networks, it can be endpoint devices. So because it is a cloud-based SIEM, there is no infrastructure setup or maintenance. You just need to technically connect all of these different data sources to Azure Sentinel, and Azure Sentinel will take care of everything for you and show all the results in this dashboard that you see here right in front of you right now. It also reduces security and IT costs because the traditional SIEM requires CapEx, it requires hardware, it requires a lot of storage, and it requires a lot of maintenance. Whereas in Sentinel, since it is cloud native and it is scalable because of the power and the expandability of the cloud, you can get a cost-effective SIEM where you technically pay as you go with predictive billing models and capacity reservations. You can collect security data at cloud scale from all sources across your enterprise, not just on Azure and Office 365, but also Active Directory servers, endpoints, databases, whether it's Microsoft databases or third parties, users, and every other devices. Of course, because it came from Microsoft, it's pre-wired integration Microsoft solution, but we have hundreds of connectors for many partner solutions from Checkpoint, from Symantec, from McAfee, and so on and so forth. It can also be optimized for your needs. You can bring in your own insights. You can bring in your own machine learning models. I've heard of partners and customers building their own security machine learning model and putting and extending the machine learning and AI capabilities of Azure Sentinel. The other thing that it does is that it detects threats quickly and analyzes your security data quickly with AI. So there might be, remember when I said in the beginning of the webinar that you can't stop all of the threats. So consider Azure Sentinel as your friend because it uses AI to detect movements of data across your entire IT infrastructure, whether it's on Azure, on-premise, or on the cloud, across different components. And this one uses ML models based on decades of Microsoft security experience and learnings. It uses correlation rules so that you don't miss out on things that you would normally miss out if you do all your detections manually or by yourself. And it uses entity behavior analysis integrated with Microsoft 365. So by running Office and Microsoft 365 for a number of years already, we have learned a lot about how users typically behave, and more importantly, how unscrupulous users typically behave. So those are just examples of how AI reduces alert fatigue by up to 90%. So the accuracy rate of alerts being sent to your SOC actually improves over time. The other bit is that it also allows you to investigate threats, and you can also hunt suspicious activities at scale. So this is a screen cap of how you would, for example, visualize an entire attack and its impact, and you can hunt for suspicious activities using pre-built queries and Azure notebooks. Respond rapidly with built-in orchestration and automation. So Azure Sentinel actually has built-in integration with Logic Apps, so you can build in your own workflow to deal with any alerts so that you can pass it on to other security products, to ticketing systems, and other additional tools, such as, for example, Dynamics 365 or Salesforce.com. Reducing alert fatigue means that your SOC doesn't get a lot of false positives. It also analyzes activities across multiple cloud services into high fidelity security cases. So if you take a look at this slide, this is a great example of how to illustrate alert fatigue. It takes into consideration billions of service layer raw events. Using AI, it filters out anomalous behaviors and detections, converts that into graphs, and then they score each of the subgraph with machine learning. So at the end of the day, you don't get to take a look at hundreds of different alerts, but it only chooses the alerts that is most relevant to you. All right, so for this part of the webinar, I wanted to now give you an overview of the different Azure networking services that actually protects you against unscrupulous activities and therefore protects your data. So this slide represents a good classification of the different networking services that we offer in Azure for connection, for monitoring and delivery. I'd like to concentrate on this part, which is protection, because it works part and parcel with all of the things that we have discussed so far. Now, as far as Azure Network Security is concerned, this is a great diagram that illustrates the different ways, the different layers of protection that you can put against your Azure deployments, whether they're infrastructure components or your application. So the approach that we are taking, this layered defense approach, a zero trust approach, you can control routing behavior of traffic coming in and out coming in from the internet and out to the internet. The other concept is logically segmenting subnets and using virtual network appliances. So these are the different network security capabilities that I want to talk about. First is traffic coming in from the internet. You have DDoS protection. You can do virtual network isolation, which is essentially dividing your internet edge together with your internal network, so to speak. We actually have a first-party firewall service to protect your application against unscrupulous data that passes the firewall. You can use application gateway with web application firewall or WAF. And then finally, you can do network security grouping, ASG and UDR before your Azure deployment itself. So protection services enabling zero trust include the things that I just mentioned about. So we provide cloud scale DDoS protection tuned to your application traffic patterns, web application firewalls, an Azure firewall, the ability for you to segment your network across different network security groups and also different VNets. So the way you put it together here is that the different cloud native security services, which includes firewalls, WAF, DDoS protection, and all of this, you can actually combine this, and we have a lot of customers that does this, combine this with other protection capabilities provided for by a number of our marketplace partners over here. Well, let's take a look at one of the components here, which is called the Web Application Firewall, or what we commonly know or call as WAF. Now, before we talk about WAF, we have to understand what are the different external attack types or internal attack types that are typically happen to web applications. The first that we are most familiar with perhaps is DDoS attacks. These are usually brute force attacks that saturate network links and resources, simply overwhelming the network or the resources of a particular web application to the point that the application will no longer be able to respond. Web application attacks also here in the second column specifically means these are attacks that are not brute force attack, or they don't involve large amounts of bandwidth, but rather they exploit web application vulnerabilities, such as, for example, SQL injection attacks, cross-site scripting, OS command injection, remote file inclusion, and other similar types. The third type of web application attack is what is called the malicious bots. These are small applications that are typically running on thousands or hundreds or even thousands of PCs and mobile devices that are coordinated through a remote command and conquer center to target both infrastructures and web applications. This would include bots that perpetrate denial of service attacks, content scraper, and also price scraper type of attack. Now, what does web application protection actually do from an Azure perspective? So if you have three different types of attacks, DOS attacks, web application attacks, and malicious bots, if you're operating your applications across the global basis, the global footprint of of Microsoft Azure allows to protect against common layer 7 attacks and legitimate traffic is go through from. So what happens is that these different attacks, including the legitimate traffic, goes through the Azure network edges, and then the combination of web application firewall on the Azure front door service, which I will talk about later on, actually protects you against that. From a regional standpoint, if let's say you are running your application not on many regions, but only on, say for example, in one Azure region, you can actually use Azure DDoS protection. And again, I will talk more about that later. And then the web application firewall using application gateway. So these are the typical combinations depending on where you have deployed and how massive your deployment of your application is. The web application firewall protects you against common application vulnerabilities, which includes well-documented and also some zero-day attacks perpetrated by hackers. It's our cybersecurity team that actually takes a look at these zero-day attacks and then gives you updates on gives advice to our customers on how to configure the WAF to protect you against those. So WAF basically operates on top of the layer 7, so that's why it's called Web Application Firewall. It's auto-scaling, it's fully platform managed. You don't need to install anything over here. It is actually it is a service that's already made available, and all you need to do is just put in the WAF policies and make that as part of your infrastructure. It can support public IPs, private IPs, cross regions, or even on-premises backend pools. OWASP top 10 out-of-the-box protection is also included. Rules can be reconfigured and also can be part of your real-time monitoring and alerting together with Azure Monitor, Security Center, and also Azure Sentinel. Application Gateway, on the other hand, is think about this as a regional ADC as a service. Similar to WAF, it is also a auto-scaling and highly performant platform that can, for example, support auto-scaling of incoming connections, especially if you have a high traffic type of web or application website. So you can do advanced layer 7 routing based on several aspects such as SSL, header, cookie-based affinity control, connection draining, and so on and so forth. So it depends on how you want to control traffic, or at least redirect traffic, or depending on the type of traffic that's coming in. You can redirect traffic, for example, through virtual machines, AKS, different Azure zones, etc. The Azure Front Door Service, on the other hand, which I made reference in the previous slide, is a global application delivery and content delivery service. It's currently operating across 35 plus countries and 65 plus metros. So think of the Front Door Service as so say for example, you have a application, a B2C or a customer facing application that is intended to receive multiple or thousands of or even millions of connections from users all over the world. The typical issue is that if you deploy your application only on one region, then a user or set of users that are not physically located in the region where you deploy your application will typically have to traverse several hops before it hits your application front end. So what the front door service actually does is that if you use this service, is that, say for example, a user from America will hit the front door service first and then redirect traffic to the actual backend web server, which may be in Western Europe or in Asia. So think about this as high-end performance application edge delivery, and security is provided by end-to-end SSL. You can actually combine the web application firewall with the front door service. So if you look at this particular diagram, you have the WAF that blocks the malicious attacks. Then the front door behind it actually routes legitimate traffic to the back end, and back ends will only allow front door access only. So this is an example of a situation where you want to combine the scalability and the ability to service millions of users all across the world, giving them positive or great or good experiences when connecting to your apps, but at the same time protecting yourselves against DDoS and specifically layer 7 application attacks. Now, we also have a first-party firewall service, which we call Azure Firewall. The Azure Firewall is a cloud-native stateful firewall as a service. So I'll be the first to admit that we're quite late in the firewall game, and we have a number of customers that are already using firewall appliances on Azure, coming from our different or hundreds of different of partners. But in any sense, we have a first-party firewall service that you can use as well. So this is quite a feat as a cloud service provider. So we're the first one to actually provide you a firewall that can do central governance of all traffic flows. You can provide VNet protection. You can do centralized logging. And it is also sometimes the go-to firewall for most Azure-based workloads. So the way it works is that you can do layer 3 to layer 7 connectivity policies. This is also managed and monitored by Microsoft Threat Intelligence, powered by Intelligent Security Graph, which feeds it known malicious IPs and FQDNs. So you have active protection or active suggestions coming from our threat intelligence network. And then it's up to you can also then configure the firewall policies yourself, as typical to any firewall appliance that's out there today. Now, the key features include, as you can see here in the slide, would include application rules, whether it's fully qualified domain name filtering, tagging. You can also do fully stateful network rules, NAT support, threat intelligence, and also integration with Azure Monitor for loggings and metrics. And because the firewall is also a integral part of your network, it also has connectivity to Network Watcher as well. Part of the Azure Firewall service is we are releasing as preview at this point. By the time you listen to this webinar, it's already in production. We also have a central network security policy and route management service called Azure Firewall Manager. This is the case wherein you have deployed several Azure firewalls throughout your Azure infrastructure across multiple applications separated by VNets. For this one, you can do central deployment configuration, you can do automated routing, you can do advanced security with even third-party security as a service, things like provided by Zscaler, Ives, or Checkpoint. Now, we've also made reference to an Azure DDoS protection service in the previous slide, so let me talk about that now. So you already know at this point what DDoS is. So it's distributed denial of service attacks. This is perpetrated by multiple machines or mobile devices across the network. Attacks your application or your servers or your networks. The first parts or the first few DDoS attacks in the beginning, a few years back, has started with brute force attacks where you simply overwhelm the network with a large amount of data, rendering the application useless to receive legitimate traffic. So DDoS attacks can be volumetric attacks such as this. And the key thing to remember when I'm talking about this slide is that the attack downtime increases over time, and the attack frequency has increased even before. So there's also studies and also research that indicates that even DDoS attackers uses cloud services as well, and zombified PCs and mobile devices. The DDoS attack types include volumetric attacks, which are brute force attacks that saturate network links. There are also types of protocol attacks, what I like to call as low and slow attacks, and these are attacks that consume actual server resources. So this is an example wherein the network may not have been fully saturated, but it is actually targeting a specific server or a specific virtual machine within your infrastructure. This would include ICMP ping flood protocols, excessive fragments, land attacks, etc. The third type of DDoS attack is also called a resource attack, wherein it targets a specific application layer and involves triggering a back-end process to overwhelm the resources of the target system. So an example here is that it may not the DDoS attack that's happening in your network right now may not be self-saturating your entire network, but it is actually making multiple requests to an application server, which then multiplies the number of requests to a SQL server, and then your SQL server then goes down. Their CPU usage goes up, rendering the entire application useless. So how does DDoS protection help? It protects, it's an automated service. Again, it's a service that's been provided for by Microsoft. You don't need to install anything. As far as that service is concerned, it protects you against the three types of attacks. It blocks malicious traffic from these attacks. And it can also work in concert with Azure Firewall and web application firewall. So DDoS combined with Azure Firewall and WAF protects you from all types of attacks. So you may not necessarily need all three different components. That depends on the situation and the type of application you're using and the type of users that you're trying to get at. But usually for large scale applications, we see customers using these three. So WAF protects common layer 7 attacks. DDoS protects you against 60 plus of 66 over 60 layer 3 or layer 4 attack types. And Azure Firewall then protects you against layer 3 and layer 7 traffic filtering. So these three provide a very potent combination against different types of attacks. So there's a service called the Azure DDoS Protection Standard, which operates across our Azure Global Network. Now, the one thing that is nice about this service is that it is tuned adaptively. It is driven by AI. So remember, in the beginning of this webinar, I talked about our 24/7 365 global security service. They are the ones that actually also monitor the entire network and makes adjustments in real time together with AI to the DDoS protection. So it protects you against the upcoming types of attacks that's coming in. So it also provides SLA guarantee and cost protection. So you can see here in the diagram, a example high-level diagram of how these components are typically deployed. So the Azure DDoS protection is designed into the Azure Global Network already. So we currently have over 30 terabytes of mitigation capacity. So meaning we can accept multiple terabytes of brute force attacks against you through the DDoS service. It's deployed across all of our regions worldwide, and it is also deployed across all of our edge sites. Like I said before, it is driven by adaptive tuning. So the protection policies are actually tuned in real time according to your application's traffic profile. It's either done automatically or done manually by some of our security professionals. But the point here is that it's the machine and the machine and man that's working together to protect you against these types of attacks. It also utilizes machine learning algorithms because it learns from the network traffic across our thousands of customers across our entire network. Remember, 6.5 trillion signals every day, and we use machine learnings to look at the patterns and determine patterns and then help our customers help us to protect you against DDoS attacks. We also provide attacks analytics and metrics that you can incorporate as part of your Azure Monitor, which provides near real-time network attack mitigation flow logs, so you can actually see on Azure Monitor where how the attack is progressing and how the service is mitigating it. It provides an attack data snapshots every 5 minutes and also provides full post-attack summary. It also provides DDoS rapid response, or what we call DRR. This is so when you subscribe to this service, you automatically are enrolled to this service, which is you use this form, and then you put in the form the type of DDoS attack that you are experiencing, so that our security team can be alerted on what is currently happening to you at this point. So they may or may not intervene with the actual service that's automatically happening. But the point here is that you get support during an actual attack that's happening. The DDoS service also has SLA guarantee and cost protection. So you have 4 nines against 4 nines SLA guarantee and also 4 nines SLA guarantee during the attack that the target resource will not be impacted. And because it's financially backed SLAs, like all of our SLAs, you will receive service credit for resource costs incurred during a documented DDoS attack. It is also integrated with Azure Security Center. So remember we talked about Azure Security Center a while ago. So part of the dashboards that you will see here may include application gateway and WAF recommendations. So there are two options for your DDoS protection needs. There's the DDoS protection free service, and then there is a paid DDoS protection standard service. And you can see here from the slide the difference between the two. So one of the things that DDoS protection standard as a fee provides that DDoS protection free does not provide is engaging DDoS experts, providing post-attack mitigation reports, real-time log streams so that you can integrate with your SIEM system for your security people to understand what is going on while the attack is happening or after the attack is happening. So how does it work together? So for example, so here's an attempt of my attempt of actually showing you how you put these components together to provide service. So let's say, for example, you've got different components in your application. You got applications running on IaaS and you got applications running on PaaS. Some of them may be running on containers or they may be using our web or application services. At the same time, of course, you have your mobile data set, your on-premise data center, your branch offices, and your mobile workers. And then this entire part is running on Azure, while you have users that are coming in from the public internet engaging with your applications. So you can also use public. So there's also, for example, a set of public PaaS services. So instead of using a SQL server on or MySQL server on IaaS, you're actually using the MySQL or the SQL Server PaaS service and other like Cosmos DB and others. So in the very front, you have the Azure Global WAF service that protects you against layer 7 attacks. And then against that, behind that, you have the Azure DDoS service that protects you against the large-scale layer 3 to layer 7 attacks. Now, if a certain type of attack passes through the Azure DDoS service, then you have Azure Firewall and your regional web application firewalls to protect you there as well. Now, let's not forget that you also have the ability to install third-party ISV services on Azure as well. You can also do virtual networking and separate your network within Azure within several virtual networks and then subdivide that using gateways or firewalls in between. So your security professional and your security architect and your network security architect has a lot of weapons in their toolbox, so to speak. And then again, this is what I was talking about, service endpoints and network and NSG grouping. So you can enable DDoS standard to get your maximum protection. Every application exposed to the public internet, remember, is vulnerable to DDoS attacks. So you should also enable application gateway, WAF, load balancer, and also protection within the virtual machine itself. So note that I forgot to put a slide in this, but within the virtual machine itself, you have the ability to for example, incorporate encryption within data within the virtual machines. Now, let's talk about Azure Monitor. So we've been making references to Azure Monitor a lot a while ago, but Azure Monitor basically is a log collection mechanism and applies AI and analytics to look at these logs and then show you metrics and then show you insights across what's happening to your application, your containers, your VMs, and your networks. You can visualize it usually using the Azure dashboard or get the data and show it on Azure Power BI, on Power BI. There are subcomponents there that allows you to analyze the raw logs, such as the metrics explorer and the log analytics, and then it also gives you alerts via email or via phone or via emails or via phone or via SMS. It automatically auto scales depending on the amount of logs that you need to take a look at. We also have a service called Azure Bastion, which is recently GA'd, which is a secure and seamless RDP and SSH access to your virtual machines using the concept of zero trust. So if you want to put an additional layer of security for your administrator so that there's no packet sniffing or anything like that while you are doing a remote session to your VMs, then you would use this service called Azure Bastion. Now, we already know, for those of you who are Azure veterans, that we have a service called Azure Key Vault, which is where you store your encryption keys We have created this new service called Azure Dedicated HSM, or Hardware Secure or HSM, and it works on different. It does the same thing except that it provides a higher level or different level of security. So in the case of, for example, where you're a customer that operates in a highly regulated industry that you will need key management, that is FIPS 142 level 3 validated, or you already have applications on premise that require such dedicated hardware just to encrypt your security keys, and you're moving that to Azure. Instead of using normal Azure Key Vault, you should use Azure Dedicated HSM as well. Now, also, don't forget that we have many ways to encrypt your data at rest. So this would include activating data encryption in blob storage in databases, using SQL Server transparent database encryption. You also have the ability to encrypt data that's flowing through HTTPS, TLS, and other encryption types while your data is in transit. And the new thing that we have incorporated in a number of our Azure services is encrypting data while it is being used. So this would include trusted executed environments such as in hardware that uses specified or specialized hardware such as Intel, SGX, and VBS, and also using homomorphic encryption. All right, so that's all the time that we have. But before we end this webinar, I'd like to give you a few reminders. You can still get your Azure free account by going to azure.com/free. Now, once you have entered your personal details, you can get $200 of credit that you can spend. This is free credit, by the way. Your credit card will not be charged. There's also available 12 months of popular free services, and there are 25 services that are always free. These are the services that are available that are going to be given to you for each month for an entire year. So you have access to 750 hours of Linux virtual machine compute, as well as 750 hours of Windows virtual machines, and so on and so forth. This is just a quick visualization of all of the other services that are available as part of the Azure free credits that you can use within the 12 months as your trial is still ongoing. Now, once you have exceeded the limits of all of the other services, that's the only time where your $200 credit becomes used. And once your $200 credit becomes close to zero, you will get a friendly email from Microsoft to remind you that your credit is low. So it will ask you whether you want to continue to use the service and this time charging your credit card, or you want to be connected to a local Microsoft partner who can then bill you so that you can continue using your Azure, and as well as use the services of that partner to help you along your cloud journey, your Azure adoption. If you want to learn at your own pace, there is always Microsoft Learn. Um, it's a long URL, but remember this URL, aka.ms/learn. All of the learning courses that you would need to learn Azure, from all the way from Azure fundamentals to Azure architecture, which are some of the advanced courses. Power BI courses are also here. Microsoft 365, Office 365, as well as Dynamics courses, and even Power BI and Power Apps. Everything that you need to learn to be able to use all of these tools and become experts, as well as preparing for certification exams, can be found on Microsoft Learn. And like I said, and let me emphasize this, these are all for free. All you need to have is a PC with an internet connection, a good set of earphones or headphones, and time. So make good use of the time that we have in order for us to upskill ourselves for what's needed to in this new world. And you can actually select the different training courses based on the roles that you have. So if you are, for example, aspiring to become a data scientist, click on the select the data scientist in the drop-down, and the Microsoft Learn will actually select the courses that is appropriate for the role that you want, all the way from basic, all the way to the advanced courses. There's also a specific learning site just for you to become an AI expert. It's called aischool.microsoft.com. This is, for example, where you can go to learn the basics of AI, AI in the business context, how AI is used in government context, and also in different industries such as manufacturing, retail, financial services, and education. Not only that, but it also gives you technical training, free technical training on how to build, for example, AI applications that uses our chatbot capabilities, our cognitive services capabilities, and all of the cloud-based and cloud-powered AI capabilities, and even Azure machine learning you can learn from this site. And again, this is absolutely free. Complete documentation is on Microsoft Docs. So the cloud adoption framework, for instance, is on the Microsoft Docs site. So just go to docs.microsoft.com, select Azure from the selection, and all of the documentation that you need is already there. This is going to be your new best friend if you start on your Azure journey, especially in the beginning. Combine this with Microsoft Learn. These are two very powerful resources to help you to help you get your technical skills to get your cloud journey going. All right, now we are at the end of our webinar. I think we are making good on time. This is the schedule of our next webinars, and you can see the URL there at the bottom where you can register for these webinars. If you're interested in any of these topics, please do visit the URL at the bottom and register there. It also includes links to the previous recordings of this webinar. So for example, if you miss parts or the entirety of this webinar, you can just go back to the this aka.ms URL and then listen to the webinar on demand. All right, now that's the time that we have for today. Thank you very much for spending what is close to an hour with us to understand the topic of today's webinar. If you like if you like these formats of learning, like on-demand webinars or live webinars, please do register in our future webinars. And then if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a note at hhermida@microsoft.com. So once again, thank you very much for spending your hour with us, and I hope you've learned something new today. Thank you.